Strickland. This webcast is one of a series in which I'm providing some brief lectures and commentaries on topics from the courses I teach in literature and cultural studies. In this one, I'm going to talk about the introduction of the characters, the knight and the squire, in the general prologue to Geoffrey Chaucer's The Canterbury Tales. So Chaucer is going to tell us, he says, about each one of these characters, and he's going to describe them to us in the general prologue. And this is going to get funny. I hope I can elaborate the humor for you. First we have the knight, and there's his picture from the Ellesmere manuscript. Chaucer writes, "Like Nick there was that worthy man, that from the time that he first began to written out, he loved his chivalry, truth, honor, freedom, and courtesy. Full worthy was he in his lord as well, and thereto had he written no man fair, as well in Christendom as in heathenesse, and ever honored for his worthiness. At Alexander was he when it was won." So there was a knight, and that one was a worthy man who from the time that he first began, he loved chivalry and freedom and courtesy. He was very worthy in his lord's wars, and for that he had ridden, no man had ridden farther, as well in Christendom as in heathen lands. And he was honored for his worthiness, and he was at Alexandria when the heathens were defeated. If I go back to this line, no man had ridden farther and fought more, as well in Christendom as in heathen lands. Do you see anything troublesome about that sentence? These chivalrous knights of the Crusades were going to the Middle East to reclaim the area around Palestine and what is modern Israel and Jerusalem for Christianity, since it was in control of the Muslims at the time. And this knight has been on these kind of campaigns, fighting against heathens. He's also fought in Christian lands. What's he doing fighting against other Christians? Well, full oft he had the poor begone above in all nations in Pus. In Letho had he raised, and in Rus, no Christian man so oft of his degree. In Granada, at the siege at Caribe, of Algezer, and ridden in Belmare. At Liège was he, and at Sataye, when that they were won, and in the great Dessay, that many noble army had he been. So he had been in many noble expeditions. He was there when they fought against the Muslims in Algeciras and in Morocco. But he's also been fighting in Prussia and other places where you might expect Christians to be. At mortal battles had he been 15, and foughten for our faith at transmissing. In list het race, in IJsland is full, this Irke worchtig nicht had been also some team with the Lord of Palatine, again another heathen in Turkey, and evermore he had a sovereign priest. And one time he was with the Lord of Palatine against another heathen in Turkey. Oh, wait a minute. He's fighting on the side of one Muslim against another Muslim. What's he doing that for? Well, he always had a good price. Maybe he was as much of a mercenary, or had been from time to time, as a noble Christian knight simply fighting for his faith. Stop for a moment and compare at least how he's represented here with Beowulf's representation of himself in Beowulf. Why is Beowulf fighting always? To be remembered, Beowulf doesn't fight for money. In Beowulf, we have Sigmund. Sigmund fought for treasure. And so there's a contrast to Beowulf. Now here's this knight fighting for the glory of God, it seems. That should be his purpose as a chivalrous crusading knight. But we also find sometimes he fights with one Muslim against another Muslim if the money is right. He was a very parfait gentle, nicht. He was a very perfect, noble knight. But, the narrator says, if he's going to tell you how he is dressed now, but for to tellen you of his array, his horse were good, but he was not gay. The fustian he wear a jupon, all besmuttered with his habergeon. For he was late to come from his voyage, and went for to do his pilgrimage. He comes straight from the battlefield, and his chainmail is smattered with bloody rust. Maybe he's just been fighting in a situation where there's a possible suggestion that he's in need of prayer.
Traveling with the knight is his squire, which in this case happens also to be the knight's son.
I should mention, if I haven't already, that Chaucer will give each of these characters very stereotypical attributes, all of the things that you expect from a college student, the ways of acting, the kind of typical sensibility, the typical mannerisms, the typical kinds of behavior of a young girl or of a businessman. Each character is described in that way. So I'll read this one in modern English. With him there was his young son, a young squire, a lover and a lively bachelor, with locks curled as if they had been laid in a curler. He was about 20 years old, I guess. Of his stature he was moderate height, and wonderfully agile and of great strength. And he had been for a time on a cavalry expedition in Flanders, in Artois, and in Picardy. And he conducted himself well for so little space of time. So he's been on some campaigns, but all in nice places to go in Europe. These would be nice places for him to go and maybe get to meet some young girl. So there's a contrast between him and his father and the kind of battles they've been engaged in. He conducted himself well and for so little space in hope to stand in his lady's good graces. He was embroidered as if it were a meadow, all full of fresh flowers, white and red. Singing he was, or fluting all the day. He was as fresh as is the month of May. He looks good. He's young, he looks the part. He has not been tested in battle yet. He's a Romeo with great potential. He knew how to make songs and well compose the words, and he could joust and he could also dance, and he could draw and write. He loved so passionately that at nighttime he slept no more than does a nightingale. He's busy at night. Courteous he was, humble and willing to serve, and he carved before his father at the table. That was his job as a squire. The squire can be seen as a slightly satirical portrait. He embodies some characteristics familiar in the narrative tradition of the chivalric romance. The chivalric romance was a very popular form of storytelling among aristocratic circles in Europe in the late Middle Ages. It presents the heroic ideal of a knight who is courageous, honest, loyal, faithful. He fights loyally and faithfully for his aristocratic lord, but he is also devoted to a particular lady. He is in love. In fact, as often as not, the lady he loves is unavailable. She may, in fact, be married to his lord. Perhaps you're familiar with this scenario from the legend of King Arthur, where there's a love triangle involving King Arthur, Queen Guinevere, and Arthur's knight, Sir Lancelot. One typical feature of the chivalric romance is that the love story may affect or blur the telling of the military adventure. I think Chaucer is slyly alluding to this possibility here. While he recounts the actual battles in which the knight has fought, Chaucer represents the squire here as someone who aspires to become a knight like his father, but someone whose battles so far have probably been more often in the ballroom, and perhaps, if he has been lucky, in the bedroom, than they have been on the battlefield. With that, I'll conclude this webcast. But, as always, if you have questions or comments, please don't hesitate to send me an email.